Today, we are going to talk about getting stuck when it comes to making decisions. If you want to seek God first in your business, but struggle to hear His voice or discern His plans, that's a normal thing. Do you always feel like you're getting stuck when you make decisions? I know that I do. An entry in my current devotional called My Upmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers is the inspiration for this episode. Chambers had an awesome outlook on seeing things clearly in our minds, and of course my brain went on to how we apply this to entrepreneurship. So if you're ready to find clarity and get unstuck in making your business decisions, you will love this episode. Let's get to it. Hey friend, welcome to the Seeking Over Striving podcast. Do you want to slow down and seek God in your business? Do you find yourself up late at night Googling side hustle and making more money online in hopes for financial freedom? Do you wake up with good intentions to start your day with God, to be more present with your family, and to get all of your to-dos crossed off, only to end up feeling guilty when you spent the day consumed with social media? You've added more to your plate and you put off that Bible study yet again? Hey, I'm Beth, and I too was constantly thinking about how to make more money, and I felt like I had to hustle for everything on my dream board, and I wished I could have financial freedom. I wanted 10K months, more peace, and to be present with my family, but I didn't have any boundaries. I wasn't seeking God in my business, and I kept thinking I was the only one who was going to make it happen for myself, until God showed me the truth. I needed to ditch boss babe culture and follow Him. In this podcast, you will learn how to slow down with God, how to set boundaries, and how to renew your mindset so you can find true financial freedom and abundance in Christ, not wealth. So dust off that Bible, grab your coffee, and let's get started. Hey friend, did you know that I do one-on-one mentorship calls for women just like you? Burnt out Christian entrepreneurs who want to slow down and seek God in their business. If you aren't sure what that actually looks like or if it's even possible, I totally understand. And I know how exhausted you are and how the idea of doing things differently sounds like one more overwhelming and impossible thing to figure out. Like you can't even wrap your mind around it at this moment, right? But that's why I'm here. I would love to be here to help mentor you. During our calls, we can help you strategize slowing down, like in an actual strategic way, slowing down and seeking God in your business to reprioritize Him. And that will give you peace. It'll enable you to be present with your family. You can experience time freedom, financial freedom, and abundance that is like far beyond anything that you can put on a vision board. Trust me, I've walked through it. I will always walk through it because it's honestly always going to be a process. But there's no reason to put it off. It's time to get back on track with God today. You can visit my website at www.revivalb.co. You can book your call, grab a notebook, grab a pen, dust off that Bible, and let's sit down and talk about this together. I would love to help mentor you through your journey as you prioritize God and seek Him in your business and your daily life as a Christian entrepreneur. So get your call booked today, and I will talk to you soon. I cannot even say how many times I have run ahead of God and made bad decisions. But on the flip side, I can't even say how many times I've sat back and didn't make a decision at all and just stayed completely stuck because I was waiting for absolute clarity before I made a decision. And the truth is we don't always get absolute clarity. If we keep waiting for that, we will never act. Now, sometimes, of course, this isn't the case all the time. But again, I've just sat unstuck, undeciding so many times because I just wanted to be 110% clear in my own mind before I made a decision. And that just doesn't always work. I have been going through this devotional journal, and it's called My Upmost for His Highest. And it's by Oswald Chambers, and it's been edited by James Raymond. I did want to throw that in there. I want to give credit where credit is due here. And it's funny because I've been opening this devotional every day, and I swear God is just speaking to me every single day when I open it. But isn't that how it always is? It's always such a blessing. But this day was so good. And of course, you know, my brain just goes to entrepreneurship and like how this applies to our lives on a day-to-day basis as entrepreneurs. So I actually just want to read you this day. It's the excerpt from September 14th. Okay, it says, simplicity is the secret to seeing things clearly. A saint does not think clearly until a long time passes, but a saint ought to see clearly without any difficulty. You cannot think through spiritual confusion to make things clear. To make things clear, you must obey. In intellectual matters, you can think things out, but in spiritual matters, you will only think yourself into further wandering thoughts and more confusion. If there is something in your life upon which God has put his pressure, then obey him in that matter. Bring all your arguments and every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ regarding the matter, and everything will become as clear as daylight to you. And there's a reference to 2 Corinthians 10:5 in there. Your reasoning capacity will come later, but reasoning is not how we see. We see like children, and when we try to be wise, we see nothing. Referencing Matthew 11:25. Even the very smallest thing that we allow in our lives that is not under the control of the Holy Spirit is completely sufficient to account for spiritual confusion. And spending all our time thinking about it will still never make it clear. Spiritual confusion can only be conquered through obedience. As soon as we obey, we have discernment. This is humiliating because when we are confused, we know that the reason lies in the state of our mind. But when our natural power of sight is devoted and submitted in obedience to the Holy Spirit, it becomes the very power by which we perceive God's will, and our entire life is kept in simplicity. Now, Chambers is like, I don't know, his stuff is really deep. Like, honestly, I have to read stuff a few times because I'm like, this is super deep and I don't know what's happening here. But the things that really stood out to me, and the note that I made in the journal part where it says biblical truth, it just brought to me, bring thoughts to be obedient to Christ and things will be clear. We can't think our way into clarity on our own power. And I also just wrote, like, in a personal application, this is what we need to do as entrepreneurs. We always want clarity, but we have to do. We have to act. We have to step out into faith, even when we don't have clarity, but we will get it by doing. And this is the opposite of the world's way. One of the things I thought of was, like, what this is saying, take it to God and then obey, even if we don't totally understand, and then we will get clarity. But when we think of clarity in, I guess, our own fleshy manner, it's like first we want to be clear, and then we'll obey or do it our way, and then we'll take it to God and see, hope he blesses it or just, mingles into our plan, however we got within our own clear minds. Another thing that really stood out to me in this was, I love how it starts and ends with simplicity. I mean, how many times do we make things complicating when things really could just be so simple? We overthink everything. And I feel like as entrepreneurs, it's very easy to do that. I mean, it's easy to do that for anybody. I think that's human, just being human. But I loved the words like simplicity showed up here twice, and it just was such a good reminder. We can keep things simple. The more we complicate things, the further we get from clarity. It's just, we always are trying to go to the next thing. We're always trying to go above and beyond. We're always trying to get to the next level. We're always trying to get to be more, to be enough, to do the extra thing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But sometimes we just need to keep it simple. And it's just that simplicity is also just one step at a time. It's one step at a time. And that's kind of like another thing that just made me remember. Like, we have to obey first. And that even when we don't see everything, when we don't see the whole picture, when we don't have the whole blueprint, when we don't have the whole plan sitting in front of us, if you are so blessed to get the entire blueprint at one time, that's awesome. Like, email me when that's happened to you. and tell me about it, because that's never happened to me. I cannot think of one time where I've ever seen the entire plan laid out before me. Typically, God reveals one step at a time. He doesn't reveal the entire plan. Like, even when we obey, we take that one step to obey and we get that clarity, but we still have to take that first step in obeying without the entire plan in front of us. And that happens, I truly believe, to stretch our faith. It is to stretch our faith and trust and surrender that control to obey and take that first step. And that trust building happens because, it's a circular process. How can we even trust him if our faith isn't strengthened? If he doesn't stretch our faith by asking us to obey one step at a time, how can we ever even trust him? If we don't trust him, we don't obey, our faith is never strengthened, and it just goes round and round in a circle. I really feel like another piece of this puzzle is just that one step of obedience. If we don't take it, he can't work. He can. God can work and do whatever he wants for us. But it's like, how do we ever get the proof in the pudding if we don't obey? If we don't act, he doesn't have the opportunity to even show us. Like, he can't even show us the next step if we don't take the first step. So keeping it simple and taking a step of obedience, even when we don't have a 100% clear picture of the plan, is how we have the opportunity to see God work. And that goes back to simplicity also. Like the simplicity of not knowing the entire plan. And even if we had the entire plan, like maybe that's just too overwhelming for us. Like God knows what we can handle. He knows what's best for our brains. He knows how much we can consume at one time. I fully believe that. Like one step at a time is probably all we can really handle. And here's the deal. If we even had the entire plan, we're still going to try to manipulate it and change it and make it our way anyway. And maybe that's also why we don't get the whole plan. It's just that obedient one step at a time. And this just isn't ever easy. This is really counterculture to the world. This is saying, take your problem to God, obey, and then you get clarity. Instead of, sit in it and think as hard as you can for as long as you can until you've driven yourself crazy. But maybe you get clarity on your own and then act and then just hope that God blesses it. I kind of already touched on that, but it's so much simpler to just give it to God. And we still may need to wait. It's not like this means we just make every hasty decision. We still have to be still and sit in it and wait until we hear his ask for obedience for that one step. Doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately. We still may have to wait, but then take that step and then get clarity. It was just a completely different way of thinking about it. And so I'm hoping that this gives someone listening a different way of thinking about it as well. Because again, as entrepreneurs, and I feel like as, if you have a tendency to be a control freak, which I think is really like every human, basically, we just want to sit and like figure it out in our own mind so bad. But sometimes we just can't. Most of the time we can't. And if we're trying to sit and like clearly see the entire plan and process, we may never act. And then we're just going to miss out on things that God has for us. You'll miss out on things that he has for your business and for your life. I liked in this devotional too, the reference to Matthew 11:25. I invite you to look that verse up and the verses around that. But it just reminds us, like, think like a child, rely on him. Like, think of your children and they come to you and ask you questions and they look to you for answers. And like, kids are so simple. Like, they just take it or leave it. It's so funny. I remember one time I was rushing to work. I had a couple of clients that I took earlier than my normal start time in the day, but of course I had no boundaries and I was like, oh, it's only a couple times a month. It's not a big deal. But then when the day came, I'm like rushing around in the morning like a crazy person. And I remember my youngest daughter, our youngest daughter, now she's 11, but she was like, I was telling her, I was rushing her and I'm like, we have to go, like we have to be ready. I have to get to work earlier today, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, why do you have to get to work early today? And I was like, well, I have this client that has to come at this time, and I told her I would do it. And so, blah, blah, blah. Like, I have to get there early, and now we're just running late. And she's like, well, why don't you just tell her you can't see her at that time? And like, why don't you just see her at a different time? I'm like, yep, that's what makes sense. Like, that would be the smart thing to do, would just to simply say, I can't do this time. I start work at this time. I mean, it's just the way kids think is so simple. And I feel like that kind of just encompasses this whole idea. Like, just think simple and like bring your petitions to God and, as his child, and he'll give you the direction. That makes so much sense. And that's so clear. And I also just thought of, being a child, that's also just humble. Like in this passage in my devotional, it said like, this is humiliating. Of course, in our like time now, in the world that we live in now, humiliating is a negative concept. But in this devotional, like Chambers meant like, this will make you humble. Like, this is going to humble you. And, being like a child and being humble, it just made me think of that phrase of like being a sheep. And again, in like today's society, like the concept of being a sheep is a negative thing. And I think especially in society today, in the circles of women, like obeying or being obedient is also very negative. Nobody wants to obey. Nobody wants to be obedient to anybody except themselves. And of course, we don't want to be sheep, and we don't want to be children. We want to be strong and independent. And we, don't want to be humble. We want to be confident and proud. And obviously, humility is not, a doormat. God is not asking us to be doormats as women. But there is something to be said to approaching God in humility as a child, as the sheep, looking to the shepherd to guide you. And really, I mean, if you're a Christian woman, I assume even in your heart, sometimes in our mind, we don't always think of this, but like in your heart, I'm sure you know that God has your best interests in his heart. Like, he has your best interest at heart. And I feel like deep down, again, even if you're not like acting like it on a daily basis, like deep down, you can trust God, and that you can follow him, and he's not going to fail you. He's going to be faithful. So why wouldn't we follow him? Why wouldn't we just be humble and follow him? And the other thing is, like, we can't follow him in some things, but not others. Like, we can't follow him when it behooves us, but then be like this, strong, independent boss babe that's gonna like do everything her way and her own power and her independence and her whatever, and like not let God into our business. Like, that is the mistake I made for a long time. Like, I was just grinding through being an entrepreneur and like this, wannabe powerhouse boss babe, make this all happen on my own accord. Like, we can't. But then in other areas of my life, I was more surrendered to him. Like, we can't pick and choose. Like, this is another mistake I think that we make in our society today. There's just so much noise everywhere, and we have these concepts that we can just do everything ourselves, but we really can't. And we shouldn't, because why would we? Like, again, let's make it simple. Why would we take all the weight of everything on our own shoulders when we can just lay it to God and obey one thing at a time that is going to bring clarity and blessing and proof in the pudding of his faithfulness and all the things. So anyway, as usual, I hope that all of this made sense in a nice little package for you. These are always just things that I feel like God is asking me to share. Things that he reveals to me that I hope to reveal to you. So it will just save you, hopefully, lots of time and trouble and heartache and, swimming upstream on your own when you could just surrender and follow God downstream, next to the stream, besides the still waters, instead of swimming up against the current of them. Like, let's not do that. We already have enough crap to do, ladies. Like, let's make things simple. Okay, let's make things easier on ourselves and just like let some stuff go and like give it to God and just like listen to what he has to say and like be humble and let down our pride and just follow him, because it's going to be so much easier than swimming upstream on our own. Okay. Thank you for listening. I'm glad you are still with me. If you're still listening, you're a rock star, and I appreciate you and love you so much. Please join us in the Facebook group. Just go to Facebook and search Seeking Over Striving, and you will find us, a group for burnt out Christian entrepreneurs that just want to slow down and see God in their business. It's a great community. Just come in and hang out with us. You don't have to do anything crazy. There aren't any mad, crazy expectations of you being in our group. We will just love to have you. So have a fantastic day, and I cannot wait to hang out with you next time. Hey friend, I hope today's episode blessed you. If so, would you take 30 seconds to please leave me a review on Apple Podcast? And I would love it if you would help me spread the movement and share this episode with a boss babe you know who may also need to stop striving and start seeking. Okay, don't let that Bible collect any dust. I will see you back here in a couple days for another episode, and until then, be intentional about slowing down, seeking God in your business, and remembering that true abundance comes from him and abiding in his promises.